Hello, my name is Charlie, and I believe that in by no means am I ready to say that I'm a behaviourist, a constructivist, a humanist, or that I work in a cognitive view of learning all of the time. I believe that as a pre-service teacher and the experience I have had in the classroom can help me to align some of my pedagogical practices with a particular theories. However, to simply believe that I work solely from one learning theory is incomprehensible. To successfully understand my personal framework for learning, I have looked at a range of different theories, some of which resonate with my personal belief and action and others that do not. I'm particularly fond of these three contemporary learning theories: the behavioural view of learning, the humanistic view of learning, and the cognitive view of learning. Within each of these views, there are also parts that I believe resonate with my personal views, beliefs, and actions, and other parts that I disagree with. Within any classroom I work in, I work through a range of different theories and a variety of different strategies. I'm a huge believer in the positive reinforcement. I love to give lots of praise where it's due and like to create an environment where everybody feels happy and included. I have witnessed the effects of positive reinforcement firsthand and honestly believe that a child's attitude towards school and learning can be effectively improved through such practices. Many of times I have used reward systems in classrooms I have taught in, and these consisted of both individual reward systems and whole class reward systems that worked interchangeably to create an environment of students who wanted to achieve. I believe that this technique resonates with Bureau Frederick Skinner's theory of operant conditioning. Students learnt that if they provided the correct action, it would be rewarded. So students developed the idea that hard working, stopping on cues, participation within class were all triggers for reward, and thus used this history of reinforcement to develop appropriate learning conditions. Like Skinner, I believe that punishment should be avoided, and that by ignoring a behaviour the student does not receive the incorrect message that his behaviour will receive some kind of consequence. And for many children, simply acknowledging their poor behaviour for them can be rewarding. So to simply ignore the behaviour altogether, the child will begin to understand that certain good behaviours are rewarded and poor choices in behaviour are simply ignored. I believe that students work at their best within a positive environment, and to ensure this within my classroom, positive reinforcement has worked wonders. I do, however, understand the implications that rewards can have on students in the long term, and that students also need to develop the ability to reward themselves, which further resonates with the humanism view of learning. Students must understand that extrinsic rewards are not always available, and that rewarding oneself for good achievements can be just as satisfying. Like Skinner, I have found through my own teaching experiences and upon reflection of my own teaching practices that Skinner's suggestion of 3 principles to promote effective learning is already what I've been doing. I believe that through presenting information to be learned in small behaviourally defined steps, then giving rapid feedback to each student or the class as a whole on accuracy of their learning, allows students to question and be involved with their own learning, and thus are able to learn at their own pace. A behaviourist believes that teaching should move from initial trial and error methods in everyday contexts, such as concrete objects that the student is familiar with, towards using particular methods with abstract symbols. This, I believe, is a critical element to teaching students mathematics. Students need to naturally progress from materials in the real world to abstract symbols to develop deeper meaningful understandings. This allows for students to learn at their own pace, a behaviourist approach, but also allowing for differentiation between students who are less confident or have lower ability levels. This practice also allows for positive reinforcement to be given between each phase. I understand and have seen how sometimes this strategy for learning can hold some students back, because they are ready earlier than others to move on. This is why it is important to remember the differentiation within the classroom, so that each student's learning is appropriate to their ability. This resonates with the cognitive view of learning that is discussed later. I also believe that like behaviour, students must understand that their success is dependent upon their own efforts. By including such reward systems that are not only able to see how hard work can get them rewarded, but through reflection students are able to note that their level of contribution to a task affects their learning. Unlike the behaviourist approach, I believe it is important for students to have good intentions and wishes. However, it is more important for those to show in all of our activities. I believe that behaviours of somebody who wants to do well should show in their contribution to their daily activities. I believe that it is no good having 1,000 good intentions but never contributing to getting them. Whilst a behaviourist believes that students' learning is best created through independent work, I have to say that there is a time and a place for both independent and group work. From my experience, I have seen both the benefits to students learning by creating an environment where opportunities for students to learn independently and from their peers have been provided. This approach to learning is not of the behaviourist, but leads me towards the cognitivist view of learning. I believe that within my classroom I will create an environment that includes children to get along and work well with one another. I believe that it is important for students to use higher order thinking skills in every situation. From this to help create an environment where all students can voice their opinions without the threat of judgment. Cognitivists believe that children should be encouraged to learn from one another. I strongly support that students learn from one another and need group work activities provided for them to learn and grow. I strongly agree that Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development and that a child learns through different stages of his life. For me, working with a school-age student, the concrete operational stage, I believe, is my key focus for student development. However, it is important for me as a teacher to note that a child can only reach this stage if the other two stages have been successfully accomplished. During the concrete operational stage, the child should be involved in learning about others, not just about himself. By providing multiple group work opportunities for students through activities like Think, Pair, Share, or small groups of 4, or even whole class discussions, students are able to interact and learn from others, but are also learning about others. I believe that this is important to give students the opportunity to have a voice, as it is important for everybody's learning. A great example is a voice in mathematics. Much of the time maths is taught through lecture-type scenarios where students are required to listen and write, but by allowing students the opportunity to share different thinking strategies, other students develop new ways of thinking. I've been able to see this in a grade 2 class where a student explained her understanding of a division sum, and other students were amazed at how well it worked. As educators, I think it is our responsibility to remember that we don't have all the answers and that peer interaction can be very beneficial. Cognitivists also believe in enhancing students' learning through cues, questioning, and advanced organisers. I also believe that in all aspects of the day, a student should be questioned or prompted to think about their learning thoroughly, thus developing higher order thinking. As cognitivists believe that learning goes through different stages in the brain, from one's senses to short-term memory, and then once rehearsed and practiced will move to long-term memory. The process of cues and questionings allows for students to use their prior knowledge to help them retain new information, but the beauty in questioning is that students are effectively using higher order thinking skills that have been proven to be more effective in the learning process. Whilst on all of my professional experiences, I have always been fond of questioning students to get them to think about their answers more thoroughly. I believe that by creating an environment where higher order thinking is imperative, I am helping students to develop more understanding of their information they are presenting, and thus helping the information move from short-term memory into long-term. Piaget believed that teachers should act as guides to the students' learning, and that the curriculum should be adapted to the individual needs. I find this very insightful. Like a behaviourist, a cognitivist also disagrees with lecture-type lessons in classrooms. I believe it is my job as the student's teacher, to provide the correct materials and helping hand, but for students to discover learning in their own ways rather than being spoon-fed the information. I strongly believe that differentiation is the key to each student's success, and like the cognitive learning theory, I believe that students should be assigned tasks for which the child is prepared for in regards to his current stage of cognitive development. Through my own teaching practices, I have found that this helps to motivate the child, as they don't find work too hard or too easy and simply give up. Piaget also believed that teachers should spend more time focusing on the process of learning rather than the end product. I too believe this to be true. Many of times I have seen students do well at many tasks during a single day, but when putting them all together they often make silly mistakes. I believe that assessment can be a daunting experience, and much of the time stress can affect a person's final outcome. I believe that it is crucially important to look at a child's progress over time, and that the checklist of anecdotal notes be taken on a weekly basis of each child to really determine what the child is capable of. I am a strong believer in creating students of lifelong learning, and that school should be preparing students for adult life, and this is why I believe social and emotional learning should be considered a key learning area in all schools. This resonates with the humanistic approach to learning. I believe that schools should be concerned about the child's emotional needs as feelings and thinking are very much interlinked with a child's academic success. Many have suggested that the association between improved behaviour, higher academic achievement and better health outcomes can be directly related to social and emotional learning. These benefits may persist beyond the years of schooling, to be reflected in more positive health and social outcomes in adulthood. Many studies have proven that children and young people with a positive state of social and emotional health are more likely to successfully meet the physical, intellectual and social changes required through childhood and adolescence. By developing a classroom where all students feel safe and comfortable is the key to successful learning. By developing opportunities where all students are encouraged to develop life skills including understanding and handling themselves, their relationships, learning and work, students develop skills in 1, 2 or 3 of the elements. This, according to Akara, leads to greater overall personal and social capability and also enhances their skills in other elements. In particular, the more students learn about their own emotions, values, strengths and capabilities, they are more able to manage their own emotions and behaviours, and to understand others and establish and maintain positive relationships. I've used numerous strategies to implement social and emotional learning throughout my teaching, but one that stands out the most is PARS, Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies. The PARS program works on 5 core conceptual domains: self-control, emotional understanding, positive self-esteem, relationships, and interpersonal problem-solving skills. In relation to the humanistic approach to learning, I believe 4 out of the 5 basic principles for education. I believe that students' learning should be self-directed, that schools should promote students who want to and know how to learn, that feelings as well as knowledge are important in the learning process, and that students learn best in non-threatening environments. I do not believe, however, that a child should be inwardly driven all of the time and that the only sense of achievement comes from themselves. What I do believe is that it is important for students to develop self-motivation and self-esteem for their later life outside of school, as positive reinforcements such as stickers and rewards tend to be non-existent in the adult life, and it is important to notice personal achievements and be able to reward them by yourself. I believe that it is my role as educator to help students feel good about themselves when they are doing well, and that I should encourage students to praise one another with compliments and encouragement. Thank you for listening to my personal pedagogical framework of learning.